Hello and welcome. I'm Hayla Alawi, Atmosphere Press's Book Publicity and Events Manager. Thank you so much for joining us for the fourth and final panel of our Day One Writers Summit, or excuse me, Day One of our Writers Summit. We'll have more panels tomorrow, and this panel will close out our first day. The Atmosphere Press Writers Summit is a completely free and entirely virtual 2-day writers conference where you have the opportunity to connect with fellow writers who are serious about their publishing goals. Whether you're preparing your manuscript or you're exploring your publishing options, or maybe you're figuring out how to promote your book once it's out in the world, this summit features 8 digestible sessions that will give you real, practical insights from industry experts. In these sessions, we'll be hearing from published Atmosphere authors, learning about book coaching and marketing strategies, and discovering how Atmosphere Press can support you at every stage of the process. In this particular panel, we'll be highlighting 2 Atmosphere Press authors, Allyson S. Barkley, a winner of the Playa Flamingo Writing Residency, and Helen Montague Foster, the winner of the 2024 Atmosphere Press Book of the Year Prize. They'll be talking about their experience with the residency and with the prize, as well as reading from their recent works. You'll also have the opportunity for Allyson and Helen to answer your questions during the Q&A portion of the event. Those could be questions about their writing, their process, or they could be questions about their publishing experiences, any sort of questions like that that you think of for them. So at any time, please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to send in any of your questions. And also check out the Answered tab also in that Q&A box, where you can see answers to questions that have already been posed. Also, just for this attendee, or excuse me, just for attendees of this panel, we'll be hosting 3 giveaways. We'll have 1 free copy of Allyson's A Memory of Light, 1 free copy of Helen's Lost Graces, and 1 Atmosphere Press merch bundle available to win. The winners are going to be selected at random, and I'll announce them at the end of this panel. One more thing before we go on is that this panel is brought to you by the Playa Flamingo Writing Residency. Playa Flamingo Writing Residency is a 5-day writing residency at a beachside private condo in Costa Rica. Included in the residency is the time and space to get your creative juices flowing, lodging at the condo for 5 nights, and 1 to 2 virtual editorial coaching sessions with an Atmosphere Press editor to discuss your project. This month, we'll be announcing our 2 winners, or excuse me, we actually already just announced the 2 winners for the 2025 Playa Flamingo Writing Residency. It's been a lot of work narrowing down more than 500 applicants, and there are always a lot of gems in the mix. So it's such a pleasure to be able to highlight the 2 winners that we have selected. You can also stay tuned to our newsletter, The Launchpad, to find out more about how to apply for the 2026 residency, which is applications are open now. You can also learn more about the Playa Flamingo Writing Residency from the links in the chat. I'm just going to put a bunch of those in there for everyone as well. And with that, I am thrilled to introduce our first guest speaker. Allyson S. Barkley is the author of the Until the Stars Are Dead fantasy series, which includes Kirkus-starred A Memory of Light and A Vision from Smoke. Born in Charlottesville, Virginia, Allyson grew up an avid reader, writer, and horseback rider. She finds herself particularly inspired by hikes in far-off places, strangers in coffee shops, and clever music lyrics. Allyson earned a degree in Global Studies and Hispanic Literatures and Cultures from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She was the 2024 Playa Flamingo Writer in Residence. As I mentioned earlier, the Playa Flamingo Writing Residency is a 5-day writing residency and editorial coaching opportunity hosted by Atmosphere Press in Costa Rica. So I'm especially excited to have Allyson with us today to tell us more about her experience with the program, as well as to read from her starred book, A Memory of Light. Allyson, welcome.
Thank you so much, Hala, and thanks for organizing all of us. I'm so excited to be here and also to hear Helen read from her book. Like Hala mentioned, I had the privilege of going to Costa Rica for the residency last summer. It was almost a year ago now, which is sort of wild to think about. And it was just a fantastic experience. I worked on the third book in the series, so today I'll be reading from the first book. Third one is still forthcoming, but I was able to make just an immense amount of progress during that time. I sort of went in with low expectations, just kind of ready to enjoy that stay and see if I could just sort of use the space to think about my story and think about my characters. And I was not only able to do that, but actually get just a ton of writing done. It really far exceeded my expectations. It was just such a peaceful experience. So I just had so much space to be creative and really feel like a writer in the ways that I wanted to. So I cannot recommend it enough. And honestly, one of my highlights was the panel that we did. I guess it was a month or two ago now, where I read along with two of the other previous winners, Carlos Andres Gomez and Ebony Stewart, who are just fantastic poets. So I really enjoyed getting this opportunity to connect with them as well. It's a really cool thing to sort of tie you together with other authors through that experience. So I really recommend it. But today I'm going to read from my first book. Like Hala mentioned, it's A Memory of Light. So it's the first in a trilogy, and it's a adult fantasy series. The first book is sort of a combo between a quest and a heist storyline. So if those are things that you enjoy in fantasy books, it's worth checking out. And the two main characters are a young woman and a young man who are sort of unwittingly, against their preferences, paired together to go on this journey. So a lot of that book features sort of the difficult situations they find themselves in along the way. So I'm going to read two short passages. The first is from chapter 7, and the other one's from chapter 9, just to kind of give you all a sense of the dynamic and some of the things they're encountering. So, chapter 7. Ari awoke suddenly, heart racing and a shadow before her eyes. She sat straight up and looked rapidly around the clearing, certain there was something lurking in the dark trees. Wrapping her fingers around the blade that had fallen in her sleep, she reached out to locate her anima. The bobcat was already on his feet, body coursing with a hyper alertness that told her she was not alone in sensing danger. Getting to her feet, Ari turned slowly, trying to feel out the presence that haunted her uneasy mind. It was there, beyond the trees to the southeast, but she couldn't quite make out a form amidst the dark growth and violently crisscrossing limbs. She took another 2 steps forward, both sword and dagger held out with steady hands. Just as she reached out to probe the nearest branch with the tip of her sword, the tree parted with a rustle to reveal 2 bright eyes staring straight into hers. Ari took half a step back in surprise, raising her blade to meet the pale chin that remained high with pride. The nymph did not even flinch when the cold metal pressed into her soft skin. Her eyes shone with an inexplicable light that could not have come from anywhere but within. The moon was nowhere to be seen, yet it reflected in the wide, black orbs that gazed out of her smooth white face. Someone must know. She opened her thin lips and began, but each word got quieter, that sweet voice quickly changing from a song to a raspy whisper. What? Ari was about to ask, when she stopped herself. Harsh lines were spreading across the creature's skin, rapidly disfiguring her beautiful form into something tired and shriveled, unrecognizable. She was an ancient black walnut, a tree creased with the pressures of time and weather and human axes. As Ari watched, the nymph closed her big black eyes and began to disintegrate. First, her hair came loose, then her fingers and arms and ears. Like a fallen log decaying into soft soil, the creature slowly dissolved into a million little pieces, ashes floating back down to the earth and coming to a rest in a neat pile on the bare ground. Her hips crumbled away, her legs, every little part disappearing until all Ari could see was the space where the nymph's eyes had stared out at her with that impressionable calmness. For a moment, she remained frozen in place, staring into the void where the nymph had vanished into earthy nothingness. She lowered her sword slowly, trying to order her frenzied thoughts. Dab had introduced her to these creatures, taught her about their ways and their strange cycle of life, but never had she actually seen one die. They don't show any injury or affliction, nymphs, and it takes many evil strokes to end such a creature's life. Ari remembered this tale as if it were only a year ago, not wisdom imparted upon an awestruck 7-year-old. Only when the pain is too much, when they have been wronged beyond relief, or the weight of old age has become unbearable, only then do they reveal all the wounds of time and go back to the earth. Never will you meet a purer being. At the time, Ari had thought this magical, peaceful. She had even dreamed of witnessing it herself once or twice. The idea of nymphs returning to the nature from which they were born seemed wholesome and beautiful, enviable even. But what she had just seen was not beautiful or tranquil. The creature had appeared pained, suffering, far from peace. Few times had she witnessed a nymph camouflaging herself among the trees, or rather transforming to become one, but each time they had been young and healthy, bark smooth like their brilliant white skin and leaves full and green. Ari had no doubt that the wounds upon that poor being had been inflicted by human blades, likely those of the men by the campfire. Ari, what are you doing? She turned to see Eli sitting up and watching her from across the clearing. Nothing. Realizing that she was still holding the dagger in a defensive posture, she dropped her arm to her side. Is something wrong? She couldn't make out his face, but the tense set of his shoulders gave away his anxious confusion. No. Then why are you armed? I thought there was something in the woods, Ari answered with annoyance. There isn't. Okay. He shrugged and lay back down. But you would tell me if there was, right? Yes, she lied to shut him up. It seemed to work because a gentle snore came from his side of the wood almost immediately. Amazing, she thought, that any being could feel so safe in such a place. She remained standing for another few minutes, looking and listening for another sign, any other signs out of the ordinary, or perhaps of the second nymph. Eventually, she realized that none were coming, and she lowered herself back to the ground. Here, Jagger, she whispered to her anima, and he shifted to lay with his chin on her stomach. With the cat's short tail flicking back and forth before her eyes, she shut them and willed her racing heart to slow into sleep. And then the second passage is just a couple chapters later, one of their next stops along the journey. Ari slipped out of the eating house as the storyteller began his third tale, an account of a renowned unicorn healer and a stallion that could run faster than an arrow could fly. She stood outside the round building for a moment, breathing in the cool summer night air. There was a chill over the mountain that spoke of an early autumn, reaching up into the peaks before it touched the low earth of the valley. It felt good to be alone, even briefly. Jagger trotted about the empty village center, sniffing at the beaten dirt path and swiveling his tufted ears back and forth with the sounds of the night. You put on quite the show in there, Eli said, coming out of the hall to stand by her side. I think they'll probably give you a star, too. I would have to die first, she returned flatly. The moon was so big and round up here, but the mountains somehow made it look even further away than it had appeared from the plains. It's an interesting thought, that candle, providing life to others at the cost of your own existence. Or it's just a candle. I suppose you don't believe in Pegasi either. Eli looked away from the moon to study Ari's profile. She did not meet his eye. They lived in these mountains once, and in the Zrinai range above the lake, but that was hundreds of years ago. No one has seen any sign of them for centuries. Now she turned to face him. They're gone. Another figure exited the hall to join them, and Ari motioned at him. Samarin will tell you the same, she said to Eli. As much as the mountain men love to talk of the Pegasi, they know there is no chance they will return to roam this earth. It's dangerous to believe in something that cannot be seen, Samarin spoke softly. You cannot trust a being that is nothing but a legend. So there's no one here who still believes they're up there somewhere? Eli asked, gesturing with his hand up towards the nearest peak. Children, the Iltzwild man answered, and those blinded to the present because they're consumed by the past. Eli made no response, but Ari could see him purse his lips in the dark. We must go back and sleep, she said to Samarin. Tomorrow is an early morning. I'll walk with you, he responded. They are not speaking of anything that I've not heard many times. May I ask what they now discuss? Ari inquired as the four of them began to make their way toward the little cabin. The war, the movements of the former military and the rebels. the destruction of the crops and the trade in the Sonrain Plains. The mountain men have not been involved in a war for 200 years, and they will not be involved in this one, he replied, but that does not mean we should not be aware of how it will affect our people. You are all capable soldiers, Eli protested. Combined, the mountain villages could create an enormous impact on the movement of the battle. Why not fight? For whom would you say we fight? Samron's tone was almost disdainful. Who can be trusted when it is impossible to track their plans or their motives? We must look out for our own people. Itzwold and her neighboring villages have passed centuries in peaceful neutrality. There is no cause to break that now. But this is not just any battle, Eli pressed on. This war has gone on for 15 years. Thousands have died needless deaths. Eli, Ari cut him off coldly. Do not be rash. The mountain people do not involve our villages in unnecessary violence. Samron's low voice hardly wavered, but Ari picked up a new coolness in his tone. And there are rumors. He trailed off and no one spoke for a minute, the dirt crunching under their boots, the only noise in the dark. The elders have received word of a new force, he said at last, as they neared the crooked wooden house. A third party to counter both the former military and the rebels. Our scouts do not know where they are based because reports come from all sides of the country. Hazy whispers at most. There have been such rumors before. Ari stopped at the bottom of the stone steps and turned to face Samarin. Yes, but they say this is different. They're stronger, or more organized, I suppose. There is no power strong enough to combat the Malavi army, Ari said definitively, or the Zarans. Apparently someone disagrees. You both have such pessimistic eyes for the world, Eli observed, more calmly now. Practical, Ari corrected, and it's time to get some sleep. The elders have extended their welcome to you, Samarin said as Ari started up the stairs. You may return freely as long as you come in peace. She paused with one foot on the stone, then turned and extended a hand to the young man. Give them my thanks. Taking her hand, he pressed it briefly and gave her a searching look. Perhaps we will see you again. Ari pulled away and went into the cabin, feeling how the warmth of his hand slowly slipped from her fingers back into the cool air. So that's it? Eli asked when the door was shut and the sound of Samarin's footsteps had died into the night. What is? No more words for your friends and admirers? Shrugging her cloak off, Ari unhooked her sword from her belt and laid it carefully at the foot of the bed. They're not my friends. No more words are necessary. Would it not be proper? This is thievery, not diplomacy. She unlaced her boots with an aggressive yank and dropped them to the wooden floor. Jagger stood uncertainly by the side of the bed. You're not quite as frightening as you seem, Eli said after a minute of quiet. Ari patted the mattress next to her, and the bobcat jumped up to stretch out by her side. I suppose I need to work harder then. You don't have to be frightening if you don't want to be. I do, if I want to survive. Survival isn't the only thing that matters. Ari looked at him with ill-concealed disdain, unsure that she had ever met a more naive being. Silence fell again, and she laid her head back onto the mattress, staring up at the flat boards that crossed perpendicular to the stone ceiling. Curved lines ran across the gray rock in a strange spiderweb pattern. She thought about how near and real the ceiling was in comparison with the distant and intangible mountain sky. She thought about how they filled that tiny wooden hut, how they were so big for a moment, but so small as soon as they stepped outside of its walls. You did well today, with your magic. Voice was a whisper. Maybe Eli was not even awake. I didn't know if I could do it. He was. Well, you can. Thanks. Good night, Eli.
Thank you so much for that reading, Allison. That was a wonderful way to introduce us to these characters and this interplay between them. So that was just excellent to be able to hear. I'm excited to now introduce our second guest speaker. Helen Montague Foster, MD, is a retired psychiatrist with over 30 years of experience in the psychotherapy of adults. Her poems have appeared in JAMA, The Pharos, Rattle, Tectone International, and Tuck magazine. One of her stories appeared in the Owl Canyon Press Hackathon 2018 anthology, No Bars and a Dead Battery. She's the author of two novels, The Silent Hen from Atmosphere Press in 2023 and Lost Graces from Atmosphere Press in 2024. Before her retirement, she was a clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry at VCU School of Medicine. Her book, Lost Graces, was the recipient of the 2024 Atmosphere Press Book of the Year Prize. The Atmosphere Press Book of the Year Prize recognizes a grand prize winner and four finalists each year. Each of these books demonstrate exemplary writing, message, creativity, and the dedication of their authors. Atmosphere Press published more than 200 books in 2024, so competition for the Book of the Year prize was fierce. And from over 30 books nominated by our staff, Lost Graces stands out as the grand prize winner. I'm delighted to have Helen with us today to tell us more about her experience writing her award-winning book, as well as to give a reading to us from this book. So, Helen, welcome.
Thank you, Hala. What a kind introduction. And I was absolutely amazed to receive the Book of the Year award. I didn't know there was such a thing. And when I got the list, when I was notified that I was on the list of finalists, I had no expectation of winning, none at all. So it's been really great, and it's really a helpful thing to be able to share with others, for publicity purposes, but also um, every bit of encouragement helps with motivation for writing. And I have this idea, and I know your audience is mostly writers, and I think a lot. I have this idea that the process of writing has MacGuffins in it, just like we may have MacGuffins that draw the narrative ahead in our writing. And so for me, um, it's when you're reading or watching a movie, there's the MacGuffin, whatever it is. I used to imagine it was kind of like a little bird or something, but it isn't. It's just, what keeps you turning the pages. And there are things that snag your attention in life. And for both of these atmosphere books, there have been things, and for each of my other probably 10 novel manuscripts, there have been things in my life that snagged my attention. For The Silent Hen, my first atmosphere book, the thing that snagged my attention is my parents had worked in intelligence, and so there were a lot of secrets in our home. They had been in the OSS, the forerunner to the CIA in World War II, and they weren't allowed to say much about it. And so by the time it became okay for them to speak of it, my father was on his deathbed and my mother had dementia. So I just was so curious. I had to do a lot of research and to satisfy my curiosity, and that led to my writing that book. And for my other book, Lost Graces, the one that won the prize, I was the MacGuffin was something that dragged me along through my life. I think there are these motives, things that we would like to say that we don't get to say. And when I was in my training as a resident, I went to a grand rounds, and the grand round, it was on economics, medical economics. And the presenter said that in order for healthcare to be affordable, that the physician-patient bond would have to be broken. And, there I was, sleep deprived, listening to that. And I didn't want that. I was going to be a psychiatrist who wants a physician-patient bond broken. But my attention then through my practice was about advocacy and about how to keep the physician-patient bond from being broken. So that's the impetus for Lost Graces. And I guess I should go ahead and begin to read. So my first reading is not actually from The Silent Hen, but it really tells you about the book. It's a scene that I cut out way early, even before the wonderful Megan Turner was my developmental editor. So I don't know that she ever saw this scene, but some scenes just have to go. So I'm going to read you this one because I think it's pretty reflective of one of the characters in the book. Try to tell me, Dr. Rolnick said from his chair behind where she lay on the couch, but she couldn't speak. How could she tell him that she had gone to a place of silence? The ceiling in his office was white plaster, the opposite of darkness, but blank as silence. And she wished to sleep, hearing his voice, which was a song to her. And it was as if she had been with him in darkness and in the coming out of darkness after she and Nura had washed Abdullah's body. My hen was named Tashina, she told him. She never clucked or peeped. This means silence, he said. What is it that you keep silent? I am still there, she said. Tashina is with me, alive in my arms. You want someone alive with you. Bella began to weep. At every session after that, she wept until one day he asked her if anyone she loved was alive. And she told him, yes, you. And she began to think of others she had loved. One day, he asked if she thought she would be a mother. One day, that night in a dream, she came to a stone wall, knowing there was a secret staircase behind. One of the stones had a crack from which she levered a small knob. When she turned it, she discovered a keyhole, and to her surprise, knew that she would find a key that fit the lock, and was able to enter a slide made of the softest of sheets. She awoke, remembering Tashina's soft feathers. But Dr. Rolnick wondered if her dream was about sex. She rolled her eyes and told him it was about motherhood. The next night, she dreamed she entered through the same stone wall, and a chick began following her. At her next session with Dr. Rolnick, she told him that when she was small, a chick had imprinted on her and followed her everywhere. When was this? He asked. After I was dead. After a silence, he asked if she had heard what she said. It was then that she began to speak about her first mother and about her second mother, whom she met in the DPT camp in Egypt. She expected Dr. Rolnick would speak to her about transference, but he kept that to himself and only listened as Bella told him how she had run into the arms of a woman who came to the camp. A stranger, he asked. A woman with the face of my mother, she said. So that's the part that I didn't use. And part of my MacGuffin about writing this was I always wondered about the little girl that my mother cared for in Egypt. And so now I'm going to give you a reading from Lost Graces, the actual winner of the prize. So this is the old opening. And again, Megan Turner helped so much to improve this book. I'm very grateful to her. This is just slightly less, it has fewer past participles in it for one thing. So chapter 1. One pleasure of my morning commute in the 1990s was crossing the two-lane Huguenot Bridge, glimpsing sunrise over the James River, often with cloudbursts worthy of old masters. At other times, mist rose off the water, and herons or geese would fly over the roadway, calming me with their muted gray silhouettes. That particular summer morning, as fog worthy of Edgar Allan Poe swallowed the bridge, I switched off my radio rather than listen to a discussion about shootings in Richmond. The tail lights of a car ahead faded and disappeared, fleetingly reminding me of a recurring childhood dream in which I searched for a missing friend. Because I couldn't see to the water or more than a few yards ahead, I had to concentrate on the road and couldn't allow my thoughts to drift further. The fog thinned enough to reveal the patch surface, low side rails, and someone, barely more than a slender gray shape crossing in front of me. I stomped the brakes in time, but he dashed into nothing before my legs stopped shaking. In my work, I'd listened to too many patients report impulses to jump from high places. As I ventured on through metaphorical pea soup, faint tail lights reappeared and a phantom mounted the rail. As the car ahead moved out of sight, the man on the brink lifted his arms and I deployed my hazard lights, hoping he wasn't leaning to dive. He stared straight at me, his face transformed with each pulse of my lights. He was no dream figure, though. I might have been misreading his situation. Before I could call out, he spooked and swung himself like a gymnast vaulting off a pommel horse. In a blink, he thumped back onto the sidewalk, ran, and disappeared into fog. Despite the lack of a clear view, it felt to me as if the ambiguous figure had been my patient, one I was supposed to see that afternoon. So, and now I'm going to jump ahead to this is in chapter 11. So just a little bit about the frustrations that I alluded to before that prompted my writing. Wednesday morning began with intensity I could barely stand. Grace Crockett was due in my office in 8 minutes. Grief for Alice Cox's family was squeezing my throat, and I'd been sent to elevator music hold, waiting to speak to a marasm case manager about Alan Rowland. Medical access, routing, administration, system management. They hadn't stretched to conceal their purpose with that name, which made me think of marasmus, protein, calorie, malnutrition, and starving babies. A syrupy woman's voice periodically interrupted canned music. Thank you for your patience. All our reviewers are busy. We will be with you in a moment. Patience. They must have meant patience with a T. Thank you for your patience and for the boatloads of money they and their employers pay for lousy insurance. I drummed my fingers on my desk and reread the letter from Marasm. Our reviewers have determined that weekly sessions are no longer justified for Mr. Rowland. We will authorize 2 sessions, which you may use any way you wish over the next 2 months. If you wish to initiate an appeal, you may call the following number anytime between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Alan and I had already used more than 2 sessions, the latest letter being their response to my last appeal. I was about to hang up when the repeating message clicked off. Hello, this is Carolyn. She sounded like a real person, but after I started to speak, her voice kept on. I'm away from my desk right now. Please leave a message or stay on the line and an operator will assist you. I slapped Alan's chart, controlling myself long enough to leave a reasonably polite message. After a few deep breaths, I looked out the window at the sky, hazy blue patches through the trees. I wouldn't be any good for Grace if I didn't calm down. So I'm just going to stop there because I think that I probably read enough, given that you haven't read the rest of the book. Might not be able to follow, but I just wanted to tell you what a pleasure it has been. And I was born in Charlottesville too, by the way, Allyson. Um, so
Well, thank you so much for that reading and for kind of walking us through that process and that experience, Helen. I think that was a great sort of focused in piece of insight. So that was really wonderful to hear. At this point, we do also have time for our audience Q&A. So again, for all the audience members, if you have a question, go ahead and type that in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. This first question is for Allyson. What was your favorite part about the Playa Flamingo residency, and what is different about doing a residency in a foreign country as opposed to one in the US?
Yeah, so the first question, to the first question, I think my favorite part was just having the time for my work. I'm not a full-time author. I'm a part-time author, and I have a lot of other things going on, which is why book three is taking so long to get out, even though it's almost done. So I just really appreciated having this space that was so dedicated to that. You know, even when you're at home and you say, I have a day for nothing but writing or whatever, it's very easy to find yourself with distractions or realize there are errands to run or whatever it is. And so going away somewhere and just saying, I am here for nothing but, you know, my creative process is a really powerful experience, I think. And yeah, it was a lot of time to think as well as a lot of time to do the actual writing. And I went and you know, I basically was off the grid. I told everyone, do not contact me unless it's an emergency. And did not really respond to, you know, texts or email or anything for about 5 days, and it was fantastic. And so I think that was really the thing for me is just having the space for that and just dedicating to that. Um, as far as it being international or domestic, honestly, maybe just the travel. Like it is a bit of a hike to get to Playa Flamingo. The flights and then the long sort of shuttle ride, which is beautiful. Like I loved the ride out, but you're going through the jungle and then along the beach and everything, and it's quite a ways to get there. So that definitely made me feel like I'm kind of going somewhere like further away. My husband came with me too. I assume you all still do this, but you offered a +1 at the time, so that was great. And we both are Spanish speakers, so it was pretty easy to navigate. But that obviously is different to like be in a place that's fully Spanish speaking versus English speaking. Um, but it's just like a different climate with the jungle and the beach and everything, and that was great, and lots of wildlife, which I thought was really fun. You all heard from a little bit from both of my excerpts that a lot of my writing is very reflective of on sort of nature and like natural elements. That's very important to me in my work. And so being there and sort of being exposed to the sounds and the smells and the colors and everything that was impactful. I didn't write about like a sort of jungle climate or a tropical climate, but just listening to the ocean and listening to the birds and all of that really sort of helped my creative processes. So I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, I think there's really something to be said about just having an opportunity to not be distracted and to just immerse yourself in this totally different environment that can really affect your creativity in a way that sometimes it just takes experiencing to understand how that works out. And I'm really excited about the possibility for authors to experience that. Our next question, this is for Helen. Now that you've won Book of the Year, tell us about your next project. Can you top this?
Oh boy. Well, you know, I alluded to hating to kill off my darlings, and in Lost Graces, which is kind of a murder mystery, one of my uh, one of my favorite characters dies. And so I had written a sequel, and there were characters who I thought, I do not want to kill them. I do not want those characters to die. And so I rewrote a novel that I had written before, one that I'd had a literary agent for, and he hadn't placed my book. In fact, he got sick and um, sort of stopped responding. And so I rewrote that book, but instead of letting the characters that I really like die, I kept them alive. So that made me have many more plot twists than I otherwise would have. So there are a lot of twists and turns in that book, mainly because I wasn't going to kill off those characters. And I had a friend too who said, I'm not going to read a book in which a child dies. It's just too unsettling. I'm not gonna read one like that, and so, yeah, so it's not a book in which a child dies anymore.
You know what? That's a minimal spoiler, but still enticing teaser for the next book. So I think we can all look forward to seeing what comes out with that.
Oh, can
This
I
next,
add
oh, sure.
to what Allison said? Well, the name of it is Tidal Overlook, and of my new book, if it keeps the same title. And it's set on a river where, there are waves and all of those things that we love about the outdoors.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm excited to see how that develops. This next question is for both authors. In your experience as writers, are there things that you thought you should avoid when considering what publisher to work with to publish these books?
Boy, that's a
I
kind of
guess,
hard question. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's a tough one. Sorry, I didn't mention. Allison, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. I mean, I think beyond just like looking closely at your contract and making sure you feel good about it, finding someone or a group of people that you feel you can trust and have a shared vision. That was really why I ended up publishing my first book, and then the rest of my series with Atmosphere is just speaking with Nick and Kyle, who I don't think is on this call, but on other calls today, about my book, and just feeling like they really got what I was trying to do without me having to explain it. Like I just getting on the phone with Kyle and having him say sort of like, these are the themes that I was seeing, and these are the arcs that, I was thinking about. And thinking like, wow, that's exactly how I felt, and I tried to write something that wasn't really like hitting you over the head with some of my sort of themes or goals, but rather maybe like sort of appeared over time a little bit more subtly. And so I really appreciated being able to speak with people who felt the same way about it, and also just appreciated what was maybe different about it. And there are a lot of things that I just didn't really want to do the way that a traditional fantasy series is written. I didn't really want to do that. And so it was very exciting to find people who supported that vision.
Yeah, I think, even when people have the best of intentions, I think, especially in publishing, there can just really be this instinct to follow the path that has already been laid down, and it's good to be able to break out of that mold, especially when you know that's not what's going to work for you in your book. Helen, what about you? Your perspectives on things that you were thinking to avoid when you were considering where to publish your book?
Well, one of the things I wanted to avoid was the actual traditional contract that I was offered at one point early on. And that required that I um, submit to them with a 6-month exclusive submission for the rest of my life, any of my writing. And at the point when I received that offer, I was president of the Psychiatric Society of Virginia, and I wrote a monthly column for the newsletter, and I wrote poems, and there was just no way that I was going to submit to them in advance everything that I wrote for the rest of my life. My husband looked at that contract and he said, "What?" He's a lawyer. It's like it was a terrible contract, but Atmosphere has a wonderful contract. My husband said, "Boy, compared to those other that other place was going to pay me, for my book, but whoa, what was I giving them, Um,
Yeah, it
so
really
that was the
calls.
thing. But I love having this atmosphere being a place that can broker all of those services that a book needs.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason the sort of phrase selling your soul comes up a lot in the book publishing industry. So I'm not necessarily surprised to hear that experience with the observing or going over the contracts. Um, Kind of a similar question, since both of you are published authors now, what is something you wish you had known about publishers or about publishing before you published your first book? Maybe we could go in the opposite order this time. So, Helen, do you want to start us off with this one?
Gee, well, that is a good question. Um, I think um, it would have been really helpful to know that my agents wouldn't sell my books. Over my writing life, I had 3 different literary agents, and I think they tried hard, and their job was really, really hard. One of them retired saying it was just too hard to be a literary agent. So I think it was quite naive, but then I started in the days of typing out your manuscript and using carbon paper because there weren't Xerox machines around that you could go and use. And um, so what do I wish I'd known sooner? I wish had been more accepting of the hybrid publishing experience. There were some people who talked it down, and I am really sorry that they do because I think it's really, really helpful. And there's some online sites where people are sort of down on hybrid publishing, but I had a friend who published with She Writes Press, another hybrid, and she said, "I'm just," and as Kyle said this morning, I'm not getting any younger. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially, thinking about the timeline and how all of that can really affect the process. And what about you, Allison? What's something you wish you had known before you published your first book about that process?
Yeah, I think I wish that I had maybe realized how many people it takes to um not only, you know, edit something to the place that you want it to be and, format and design and all of that, but also, market the book and get the book out and all of that. So, um I didn't really know what I was doing and kind of just went into it thinking, well, like I wrote this manuscript, so I'm done, and that's not really how it works. And so the process is a lot easier with the second book, and I think will be even easier with the third book. But it's definitely a pretty steep learning curve to realize, how many cooks end up in the kitchen and sort of how many people you have to lean on if you want your book to be the best it can be. So I tell everyone that I speak to that's interested in publishing, like, get all your alpha readers, get all your beta readers, talk to a lot of people you trust, and then like really lean on your editors as much as you can because it's a lot. And then just making connections with local booksellers or influencers online or whatever path you're going down to try to get your book out there. That's a lot of work, but once you start fostering connections you have, it kind of becomes more organic from there. So yeah, I just did not, I just felt like I did the hard part already. And it turned out for me, the hard part was like after not writing the first draft. So, yeah, I think recognizing that it takes a lot more time and a lot more people, than you think it's going to, and really cherishing those relationships too and fostering those relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And I hear that so much from authors is how surprising it can be how much happens after the writing has finished and now we're editing and now we're publicizing and all of these other steps. So it's good to have an idea of what to expect before you get into it, and experience is the best teacher in that way. But at this point, I do know that that's all the questions we have time for in this panel. But if you have a question that wasn't answered, please come back tomorrow for more panels, as well as check out Atmosphere Press's YouTube channel. We've got previous live sessions, both with publishing professionals and also live author readings, which Allison and Helen have both featured in previously. So you can find more of their wisdom and their readings there. That being said, for today, thank you so much to Allyson S. Barkley and Helen Montague Foster for sharing your books, your experiences, um, your publishing navigational processes, that kind of thing with us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us and sticking around and for your thoughtful questions in this Q&A. That concludes day one of the 2025 Atmosphere Press Writers Summit. We will continue tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 9 a.m. Pacific. It's 11 a.m. Central. It's a bunch of other times around the world. We'll be starting with a panel about preparing the perfect manuscript submission to get picked up for publication with Dr. Trista Edwards. We'll be giving away more exclusives tomorrow, and Trista's got a ton of industry experience, so it'll be great to get her perspective on all that. The webinar link for tomorrow is a different link from the one today, so if you haven't already registered for day 2, make sure you do so at the link that I'm putting in the chat for you all, so you can check that out. And with that, I'm also happy to announce this panel's giveaway winners. The winner of a free copy of Allyson's book, A Memory of Light, is Allyson McBain. The winner of a free copy of Helen's book, Lost Graces, is Tori Beatty. And the winner of an Atmosphere Press merch bundle is Wayne Paul Mattingly. Please look out for an email from Atmosphere this week about arranging the delivery of your prizes. And in the meantime, we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow.